Do you guys know that meme with the Roman Empire? It happened a couple of months ago. You had many women on TikTok and on Twitter basically being shocked and surprised that their husband is thinking about the Roman Empire. And I wish I had like one of those TikTok ladies asking me, "Hey V, do you think about communism?" So that I can answer. It's like, oh my god, yeah, all the time, all the time. Oh, I always think about communism, even now. I think about communism even now. There is not a moment of my life that I don't think about communism. Whether it is the fall of the Soviet Union, the bread lines, the smug and arrogant elites that are grasping for power, the people that are fighting amongst themselves using ideology while they're starving. Like, I do think about comedy all the fucking time. This is why I constantly make the comparisons, especially with the EUSSR, as it's more aptly called. Remind me, what was Hungary conquered by an empire that they get to be humiliated like this? Like, I got no love for Hungary, to be honest. But if it happens to Hungary, why can't it happen to Romania? Or why can't it happen to any other nation? When did the European Empire conquer us, huh? Isn't like taxation without representation a bad thing? Like no, seriously, what is the difference in being conquered by an empire or the situation that Hungary may find itself in? Like, basically, you're being told by a foreign power how to run things in your country, and you have to give that foreign power money in exchange. So you still pay them taxes. You still have to follow their rules and regulations. It's just that now you would not have a say in things. It is fascinating, right? The reality is that the European Union started as a trade union. And everyone that was saying this is the start of a federal state, this is the start of a European empire, those individuals were called crazy, insane, they were being ostracized. But you know what conspiracy theories are like? They're like spoiler alerts. They turn true in 2 days, or if they haven't turned true already, they will probably turn true tomorrow. I'm actually starting to think if there's a single conspiracy theory that's not turning out true, like even the fucking aliens apparently are on Fox News now. And like Fox News, oh, we found UFO. We don't call them UFOs anymore. We call them... It's very interesting, isn't it? But like, the reason that this is a problem, if you don't understand, is that there are actually 4 Europes. Okay, like there isn't one Europe. You have Northern Europe, Western Europe, Southern Europe, and Eastern Europe. All of these 4 Europes are behaving in different ways, and sometimes we find the ways that the other Europes are behaving quite reprehensible. Like, for instance, I'm looking at Western Europe, right? Like the very idea that they will go and try to ban Twitter. I find that reprehensible. They haven't already, but like if you're following the news, they're trying to, like sue Twitter and find out like what can they do because there's like harmful misinformation on Twitter. Like that is not an Eastern European concept. We don't behave like that here. We already had communism. We don't need any more of the fascist shit. Like the freedom of the press needs to exist. I understand that they think that the press only means the corporate press, but the reality is that the concept of the freedom of the press actually does refer to the free flow of information. And the thing that triggered them on Twitter isn't even like the misinformation. What triggered them on Twitter was that when Israel got attacked by Hamas, there were a lot of violent images on Twitter. And they were very concerned that people may see those images. And I'm like, well, yeah, sure, but like those images aren't illegal, right? Like, why is it okay for CNN to show pictures of children in Syria under a gas attack, which you can find that on YouTube right now, by the way. But for some reason, if you show it on Twitter, that's too much. And their action is to try and ban the platform. So if you happen to be in Hungary, right, like their legislation would take effect, and you from Hungary would not even be able to vote against that. Well, actually, you can't even vote on it anymore because they already voted to give the European Union the power to do so. But that is just like one thing. Another thing, right? How can Germany, right, a country which is trying to ban one of the largest political parties in its borders, the AFD, which has over 25% of the voting base right now, and they're trying to ban that, right? So like smaller parties are like, oh, we want to ban the AFD. In other words, we want 25% of our people to not be represented. Like 25% of our population, which is pissed off because we're fucking with the farmers and we're making their way of life worse, we should make sure that they don't get represented in order to preserve democracy. Like, I'm sorry, but as an Eastern European, I find that beyond reprehensible. Right? I do not understand why a country like Germany has a say in the things on how Romanians should live their life. Or any other Eastern European. Like, we don't do that here. We don't ban political parties. We don't... This is unthinkable. Sometimes the parties we don't like win elections. That is it. You know, after 4 years, you have another turn of elections. But, you know, I guess like the German politician is mad with power. They cling to their seats. And they find it unthinkable that even for a small time, like 4 years, they may be out of power. So that's that, right? Like, this is what's happening in Western Germany. By the way, Austria, weren't they the country that during the pandemic, they flirted with the idea to arrest anyone that doesn't get the Pfizer communion? Like, again, we don't do this here in Eastern Europe. We just don't. We don't behave like that. We're not fascists. Like, I understand Western values are so superior and so more enlightening, but keep them there. You know, I'm not telling them to stop. You know, like, if you want to live like that, that's fine. You know, if you like the boot, if you love authoritarianism, if you need big government to censor what you see to keep you safe, perfect. But keep it over there. Don't bring it over here, right? So how do they bring it over here? With shit like this. Like suspending voting rights. So it's already cumbersome that we're within the European Union. A good thing, though, is that a lot of Eastern Europeans are starting to dislike the EU. Dislike the EU because of stuff like this, right? The whole thing with the rule of law, I would also like to point out, they use rule of law and corruption as a beating stick. It's the same thing like using racism. You know, like America is systemically racist. How do you disprove it's not? And they will find like a couple of examples where racism happened, and therefore your entire country is systemically racist, right? It's the same shtick, but it's adapted for Eastern Europe because they can't really play the race card over here because the population is a lot more homogenous. But this is what they're doing, right? And another thing, they always say that Eastern Europe is more corrupt, and it's like, I'm sorry, but just because we don't crack down on the press as much as Western Europe does, that doesn't mean that Western Europe doesn't have corruption. Like, Western Europe is very corrupt. It's just that they silence the press. And I always said in my previous live streams that observing the behavior of my grandmother told me a lot about the power of the press. So basically, during communism, the propaganda was that there is no crime. We live in an age of prosperity, everyone is doing great, so therefore there are no thieves. They don't need to steal, everyone is wealthy, right? So my grandmother would sleep with her door open. Back then you didn't have air conditioning, and she would just leave the door to her house wide open so that the air can come in. After communism fell, the press started writing about whatever it wanted, and they noticed that the ratings go up if you talk about crime. We called it the bedsheet and the morgue, because literally that was everything they talked about. It's like, who got killed, who got raped, you know, and in a country with 20 million people, like, finding certain cases wasn't that difficult. And that was the only thing they talked about on the news, non-stop. It's like, in this city, this old woman, she was raped. This city, this old woman, she had people break into her house and was raped. Non-stop, just that on the news. All of a sudden, my grandmother was afraid. She was terrified. She actually not only closed the doors, but she would move a table during the middle of the night, right? So like before going to bed, she would move a table in order to barricade the door. And when I went to law school, I actually looked at the statistics, and you know what I found? That during communism, the crime rate was far worse. But because of the media and the way they reported it, it seemed that the opposite is true. And this is exactly what they're doing to Hungary and stuff. You know, it's like, oh, we're so concerned about the rule of law. Oh, the rule of law. Yeah, sure. Interesting how the rule of law in Germany is not being placed under question. I mean, again, is it the rule of law in a democratic party to ban one of the biggest parties in the nation? And if it is, then why are they in the European Union? Because I find that to be incredibly concerning. Like, how can you have democracy? You know, like I would understand like banning a fringe movement, right? Like some radical extremist organization. Okay, 25% of your people. Jesus. Let me know what you guys think. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.